Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Viva Connections SharePoint Framework bi-weekly sync. I'm Hugo Bernier. I'm your host for today, and today is April 3rd, 2025. We have an action-packed agenda today. We're going to give you the latest updates on the SharePoint Framework, all our community project updates. We'll do picture time with Together mode, and then we have three awesome demos. Ahmad AlHak is going to show us how to use Reducer or use useReducer hook for managing complex states in SPFx projects. Sandeep is going to build an enterprise employee directory with SPFx, and Chris Kent is going to do an SPFx development scenario Wowee edition. We have tons of resources available to you. We have our Microsoft Community Learning videos. We have our LinkedIn page and group discussions and updates. We have our open source repositories or sample galleries, and all of these can be found in the open source initiatives and samples homepage at aka.ms/community/home. Make sure to give us a visit. We host regular community calls, the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community calls. We have the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call, which is a weekly call with Microsoft speakers. And then on a monthly basis, we have our Power Platform community call, our Office add-in community call, and every other week, we alternate between the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call bi-weekly call and the Viva Connections SharePoint Framework bi-weekly call. You can get all the invites from these calls at aka.ms/community/calls. And our next Microsoft 365 and Power Platform weekly call on the April 8th, we're going to have the latest news from Microsoft Engineering on Microsoft and 365 Power Platform topics. We will have our community together mode as usual. And then Kana Manika Vasagam is going to show us the next-gen data management for Power Platform, Fabric, and Copilot. Aicha is going to show us how to enhance custom engine agents with Azure AI and Tenant's AI library. And April and David are going to show us how to use the Power Platform snippets. And if you'd like to present, you are always welcome to share any cool stuff you've done. So you just need to go to aka.ms/community/request/demo, and everyone is welcome. It doesn't matter if you're an expert presenter or if it's your first time. This is a welcoming community, and everyone's always happy to see the cool stuff you have to share. Now, if you don't know how to get started in contributing to our community, we have some guidance available to you. And to talk about this is David.
Yes, thank you, Hugo. Yes, so friends, if you're wanting to demo on these calls, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to demo. I got some stuff, but what would I show? You might want to contribute a sample, or you might want to use a sample or enhance a sample. And as Hugo mentioned, these are sessions that are going to give you that gateway to greatness. They are live, they are hands-on, they are safe space, which means we do not record them. We just had one a few weeks ago. We're getting one scheduled, especially over the next campaigns for badges that we'll talk about here in a moment. We want to make sure that you're equipped and empowered. So check it out. Make sure you keep an eye on it. We'll get those scheduled, aka.ms/sharingiscaring. They're going to provide you hands-on guidance. We're going to work together, and they count as a contribution, which is super, super cool. So you're like double bonus there, right? And of course, once you do contribute, we want to recognize you for the amazing work that you're doing, which is our recognition program. So many cool, exciting badges right now. We've got things like our Prompt Pro. We've got our Snippet Sorcerer, which we'll talk more about on that Tuesday call. The two events that just ended, that hackathon badge is going to be going out next Tuesday, so be on the lookout for those. And then, of course, yes, our Star Wars just kicked off on the 1st. So I've already seen out in the wild, may the open source be with you. These are 3 badges that are attainable just by simply doing 1, 3, or 5 contributions across any of our repos over the next 3 months. So super exciting, a lot of fun. They are real and accredited though, so they will absolutely show that you are making a difference. So you can share them on LinkedIn, on your blogs, on your resumes, all of the above. So make sure you're opted in at aka.ms/community/recognition. And one more opportunity for some exciting new badges. Since Copilot is so popular right now, we are rewarding those who are going through the pathways for the dev camp of Copilot. So check it out. Only the first 200, and there are some dates available on that. So you can go to aka.ms/copilotdevcamp/awards to learn more. Hugo, back to you.
Wonderful, thank you. And just in time to pass it to Vesa to talk about the SharePoint Framework update.
Excellent, excellent. So quick updates in here. We're looking into rolling out a new version of 1.21 as an updated preview version pretty soon. Could be happening today, could be actually early next week. We're not going to ship that on Friday. So that's rolling out. If we go to the following slides, quick recap on what will be in 121. Well, actually, before we go there, all-time highest usage records worldwide was actually again achieved this week. So it's pretty cool. The usage is just skyrocketing. It's just mind-boggling to see. So really cool. On the following slide, super busy slide, but 120 is still the latest version from September. 121 preview will jump us to Node.js 22, including TypeScript 5 and a few other things. And we are looking into getting this to general availability by end of April. So that's addressing, for example, the Node 18 end of support timeline. So that's going to roll out, I think, in the 21st of April time week is now the target. We're still working on a few of the details on that one. But again, as said, Node.js 22 support with 121 beta is coming out today or early next week. So that's the beta 2 for 121. But that's pretty much it. Quick update on that side. Let's jump on the individual projects.
Wonderful. Let's talk about our individual projects. And the first is to talk about our Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community blog. We have a blog at pnp.github.io/blog, and the latest updates are the Power Platform Solution Deployer to centrally manage and deploy reusable components by Valentin. Understanding SharePoint Framework Toolkit Management Capabilities by Sandeep. Sandeep's been a busy person. And How to Build a List Formatting Samples SPFx Web Part by Louisa. Scaling SPFx projects with NPM workspaces, how to manage multiple solutions efficiently by Ahmad. Now, if you contribute to the community blog, and everyone is welcome to do so, you will get a fancy blog author badge. So please make sure to join us, and you can scan the QR code to do so. We also have a repository of Copilot prompts. Everybody is welcome to share their cool samples of Copilot prompts that they've been using, and every week we select a prompt of the week. This week's prompt is by Valeras Narbutas, and he has a cool competitive analysis report. And the prompt is, and I actually practiced my broadcaster voice for this one.
Generate a comprehensive report using the latest available market reports, company financial filings, and product comparison sheets. Identify key differentiators, pricing trends, and emerging customer preferences based on online sentiment analysis. Summarize competitive advantages and weaknesses for at least 3 key competitors. Conduct a SWOT analysis.
Sorry, that's really hard on the throat. I don't know how you do it, David. And again, if you want to see these prompts, you can go to aka.ms/pnp-prompt-library. Now, to talk about the PNP.js client-side libraries, here's Julie.
Hey, I quickly just updating to say there is no particular update right now. We did a 4.11 release on March 17th. We are headed for, obviously, a next release in April, but as of now, there is no changes there. We're working on version 5, though, so take a look at the project tab in the repo if you want to see what's up for version 5. And if you haven't yet, update to version 4 because version 3 support has ended. And also you can, if there are any PRs that do get merged in, you can test those out with the V4 nightly builds. So check those out there. That's all I have. Back to you, Hugo.
Awesome. Thank you. And no news is good news. Now to talk about the CLI for Microsoft 365, here's our friend Gary.
Thank you, Hugo. So yes, we've got a new version of CLI for Microsoft 365, a new stable version, which is 10.5.0. So this includes 3 new commands for Microsoft Graph to create, get, and remove directory extensions, We have new commands for SharePoint Online, adding home sites and removing sections from modern pages, and for Viva Engage as well to add and remove users from a specific community. So if you want to get this latest version, you can get this from npm. Just use the latest tag. And if you want to use our Docker container, you can also use the latest tag there as well. Full details of bug fixes, other minor enhancements as well. You can get those details at aka.ms/CLI-M365/notes. And if you want to get involved in our community, go to our Discord server. You can get the invite link at aka.ms/CLI-M365/Discord. Next slide, Hugo. We also have a new version of dev proxy. This is 0.26.0. If you don't know what dev proxy is the easiest way to mock your APIs and simulate their behaviors. We've got some new plugins, new features that have been added. One new plugin, which we're really excited about, is for you to be able to check the requests that you make using SharePoint CSOM and check to make sure that you're using the minimum amount of permissions. So we're really interested in working with you if you're wanting to use this, because we know not everything is documented and we're trying to document all these minimal permissions as well. We've got a new option for discovering URLs. So if you just want to get a collection of URLs that your app sends requests to, then you can use that. You can now run dev proxy in a Docker container as well. We've published an image to the GitHub packages, so you can get that from the GitHub packages domain. Just use .net/dev-proxy. Another ease of use change. So now if you want to watch every URL, you can just put a star in. You don't have to put HTTPS in front of that. So it's just a little bit easier. And we've also, along with this release, released a new version of the dev proxy toolkit, which has snippets and improvements for working with our configuration files as well. We have a new version coming at the end of April. That'll be 0.27. And back to you, Hugo.
Wonderful, thank you. And now let's talk about the reusable SPFx controls. We have 2 repositories of React controls that can be used within your solutions. One is for the body of your web parts, which is the SPFx controls React, and one is for your property panes. There are no updates right now, but if we were back in March, we would still have the March challenge, which was running up to 1.5 weeks ago, I guess. But they were both applied for the PNP React control and PNP property controls. Again, we welcome, regardless of the March challenge, we welcome contributions to this repository. Every contribution counts. That includes bug fixes, removing typos, and adding features. You can get all these at the URLs below. Now let's talk about the SharePoint Framework Toolkit for VS Code 4.4.4. There are 14 issues that are available for anyone who would like to contribute. And if you go to the repository's issues, you see they are tagged with Help Wanted. And if you're a newcomer to our community and you just want to get started, look for tags that say Good First Issues. They're usually easier to handle, and it's a great way to get started. If you contribute to our SPFx Toolkit, you will get a fancy badge for SPFx Toolkit. Again, we love everyone's contribution and we welcome them. And now let's pass it to Casper to talk about the PNP Modern Search.
Thank you, Hugo. We are on a pretty stable version right now, 4.16, and we haven't had any issues really with that one yet. So the only kind of issues, we got a lot of issues on the list, but they are mostly enhancements. And we also very much welcome any PRs on our side. We have 2 repositories. We have one for the main project, and then we also have what you see here on the screen. We also have a repository for layout samples where people can contribute by showing us some of the fancy samples they have created for PNP Modern Search. And in this session, we have one from Saskia Picht, who had created a wonderful news slider That way better than the one that we get out of the box. And it is based on the PnP modern search, of course, and it is a wonderful sample where she really given it all what she got on that one. So if you might need one of those, or you just need some inspiration one day, have a look at some of the samples we have in there. There's a lot of very fun stuff, and also something that you can expand on pretty easily because these layouts are very easy to expand on. So a big thing to her, and she's of course gets another badge as well. We got one for contributors, both for the main project and for the samples projects, and we'll love to see your contributions as well. Back to you, Hugo.
Thank you. Did you know that we have a repository for SPFx web parts and extension samples? We do, and you can find them by going to aka.ms/spfx-webparts. The latest update from the last 2 weeks is an update to the image editor web part by Peter Paul Kirshner. And he has, if you've never tried that web part, it's actually very powerful. It allows you to edit images with all sorts of cool features. And it's now updated to SPFX 120. We welcome contributions as always. And speaking of more contributions, we have our adaptive card extensions with Derek.
Yep. Thanks, Hugo. And we have no new samples this week. But if, as you said, if somebody wants to update some of the existing samples or submit some new ones, we are more than willing and able to review and approve those PRs. So keep them coming.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, and now let's switch to picture time for everyone to get a chance to show how awesome this community is.
Yes, thank you, Hugo. We will get this. All right, there we go. Let's get this moved over. And all right, looking good. Seeing some of those fantastic faces. Wonderful. There's Steph and Zhao and Derek. They're doing the wave. Vesa and Derek. Looking good. We got just a couple more seconds if everybody wants to. Yeah, he's doing the hula wave now. Excellent. If you want to get your cameras turned on, I know team's a little delayed for a second there, and there's a little bit of the non-clear pictures. Clearing up though. There we go. Okay. All right. Let's give everybody just a couple more seconds. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right. Let's wave, everybody. Great to see you all again. Thank you for coming to the calls and supporting the community in the way that you do. We really appreciate it. Love everything you're doing. Thank you so much. Keep it up. Amazing work. Inspiration for us every single day. So we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hugo, back to you.
Wonderful. All right. So we have 3 awesome demos lined up. Cool. Hopefully we can see my screen.
Try again. I don't think it's I think it tried and then it like abandoned for a second. There we go. Perfect.
There you go. All right. So we have 3 awesome demos lined up today. And to first present, we have Ahmad AlHak. And I'd like to remind our presenters that we would like to try to stick to 10 to 12 minutes each demo. So we have enough time for everyone. Ahmad?
Okay, thank you. So I will share my screen. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see your team screen. There you go. There's your PowerPoint presentation. And if you don't mind putting it in presenter mode, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So is it better now? So can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah.
All yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Ahmad, and today we are going to talk about useReducer hook, which is one of the most complex hooks on React applications. We will see how it works and why we need it. Yeah. So the simplest way to think of useReducer hook is to compare it with a use state hook. So all of us are familiar with the use state hook. So we use it for managing our state in the React applications. And similarly, we can do also with the useReducer hook, we can use it to manage state. So both of them are being used to manage state in React applications. but they function a little bit differently. So with the useReducer hook, so it follows the Redux pattern. So as you see on the right side, we have different syntax to the use state. So we have something is called dispatch, as you see here. This is something we define we define in our script, our actions. We define, for example, add an action, edit an or add an item or edit an item, or get items from SharePoint list, for example. And we use a dispatch to call specific action in our reducer. So we define all our actions, and we can call it using the dispatch here. On the right side, as you see, we have also two parameters. We have the reducer and the initial state. The reducer, it's a function. It's already defined in our application, which takes two arguments. So the first one is the current state, which we have it. And the second argument, it will be the action which we pass along with the state. So let's say, for example, I want to increment my age, for example, here. This current state will be passed along with a action which we already triggered here. Initial state also should be defined in our application, so we don't get any errors here. And this is how it works, the user hook. So, but here's the question before we go also deep in more details about useReducer. So we need to check why we need it. So because we use state, it works for most cases. But as our apps, as the app grows, managing state will be a little bit more difficult. So, and as you know, so for example, the logic will be distributed between our component or between several files in our solution, which will make it a little bit more difficult to manage it or to keep track of our updates. So our logic will be distributed along across multiple files in our solution. Same also, we have another issue, which is our code also, we need to keep using sets value for specific piece of the state. So we will keep using this also, this functions. We need to create more functions to keep track of, to update our state here. Also, if you want to, as also the app grows more, so I think it will be more difficult to maintain the state or to manage it here. So I will go to the next slide. So this slide explains how useReducer works here. So as you see, let's take, for example, we have a form here. When I click on the add item, the dispatch function will be triggered. This trigger will also pass the function, as you see on the right side, add an item, and we pass the current state, and this reducer will modify the state, will create a new copy of the state, and do these changes which we requested, and return new state. So it's a mutable change, it's not mutable. Yeah, and we create a new copy of the state, and this this update will force the app also to be re-rendered on the UI. So I can show an example now. So as you see here, we have a counter, a very simple example for the counter. As you see, we have used state hook. So this is the issue here, which I mentioned here. So to update the count or to check if it's even or not, we need to send two requests, as you see here. So these are two calls, and it could be also in other solutions. We have more requests, we have more dependencies here. So which will require us to also create more set states. So this is, it's not perfect if we have a big application here. And here where useReducer comes here. So for example, as you see now, we have a function for each operation for increment, decrement, receipt, or double. So a little bit we are repeating the same code which we are writing here. With useReducer hook, this is another solution. As you see, we have this function here, or this line of code here. First, we need to import the useReducer hook, as you see here. And then we have the useReducer here. This is the method we call our reducer. So we could have one reducer or multiple reducers, for example, for a form, for a SharePoint list, or whatever. But we have here the counter reducer, for example, here. And this function is already defined in a separate file. So we have the logic in separate file, and we have our UI component here. So as you see in this file, we have our counter reducer, which we imported in the other file. First, as I said, so we define the state, as you see here, and then we define, so this is the interface for the state, and then we define our state. and then the actions which we need. So for example, in this case, we need to increment, decrement, reset, and double here. And here below, we have the counter reducer. We have a switch here, and then we can define which action we need. So when we, in this file here, as you see, I click on the button here, dispatch increment. This means this function, this action will be triggered. We will make a copy of the state of the current state by using the spread operator here. And then we modify the state and we return a new copy of the state here. So as you see, so here, and this will force also the app to be rendered as you see here. So every time I click here, an action will be triggered from this function which we have it here. Yeah, this is how it works. And also, as you see here, we can also do some manipulation for the state. As you see, this is also outcommented here for this demo. Yeah, obviously we can set, for example, max count or min count here, and we can do some operation before also updating our state. We want to check, is it 0 or not? If it's now 0, I want to decrement, so I can block it. So I can write something like this, like this line here. As you see next. So if it's 0, you cannot update it. If it's more than 0, then you can decrement it there. So this is how it works. Now we come to the interesting part, maybe. This is how to use it in SPFx solution. This sample also on the PMP sample repository. As you see here, we have our solution. And here we have, I think, it's a bit small, yeah? I can make it a little bit bigger. Okay. So as you see here, we have our solution. We have already defined list reducer here, as you see, and we have our initial state. So here, whenever I want to call these items, I just trigger dispatch fetch items, and then this I can start. So for example, will make the app to be in loading state. When I get the response, I can pass the item as a payload, or when I get an error, I can pass the error as a payload. So as you see here, we have this folder, which includes everything we need for the reducer. We have the action types. So I defined here all the actions which we need: fetch, start, success, and error. And below here, we have also the interface for the state, and also the interface for the actions. As you see, we have start, here we have payload, and here also the error we have payload here. And this is how it looks here. Whenever we trigger dispatch function, so this will we will pass the state, we will pass the action, and then we can also do or modify our state here. So as you see, when I click fetch start, this will make the loading property true. And then, yeah, this is, for example, this one was a fetch success. We will make it false, and we will pass the payload. We can show also the items which we rendered. So just to summarize, the most benefit here. So as you see, we can update multiple properties at the same time in one request. So unlike with the use state, so you need to use set value multiple of times, and sometimes it doesn't work perfectly here. Yeah. So that's why when we are using useReducer here, we can update our state. If we have multiple properties, we can update these multiple properties in one request, which is make it more efficient. And also the other advantage, it is we centralized our state outside of our application. So it's easier to read, easier to extend. So in my opinion, it's more efficient. So this one, it's not for small applications. So it's not that this is right or wrong. Both of them are, we need both of them. So use state for small solutions, use reducer for more complex solutions. Yeah. So that's all from my side.
Right, that was a great demo. Thank you. And I believe this was your first presentation in our community, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't. It's the first one.
Wonderful. Hey, well, everyone, please give Ahmad a great hand for good work. Awesome. And thank you. And now let's move it to Sandeep to talk about building an enterprise employee directory with SPFx.
Thanks, Hugo. Let me share my screen. Yeah, hope my screen is visible to you. Yeah.
Yep.
So
go ahead.
Yeah. So before getting into the demo, let me give a brief intro about me. So I'm Sandeep PS from India. I'm working at EY as a senior software engineer. I'm part of this awesome community since 2023, and I'm currently focusing on SharePoint and Azure apps development and community contributions as well. So let me quickly jump into today's agenda. So I'll be starting with giving an intro to the employee directory, and we'll be seeing the demonstration, live demonstration, and later I will move to the code walkthrough. So the sample which I'm going to demonstrate today is employee directory web part. This is actually part of the Refresh Ranger initiative, which we had in the last year. So in that, we have updated around 43 samples to the latest version of SPFx 1.20, which was the latest version at that time. So that actually includes web parts and extension. So I got a chance to upgrade few sample, and the employee directory is one of them. So coming to the employee directory, it is an web part where users can able to search employees within your tenant and can be incorporated to SharePoint sites and MS Teams channels. So behind the scenes, it actually uses the PNP search to retrieve user properties from the tenant. Means we don't need to use Graph API and give permissions from the admin center. So the upgrade process was actually straightforward because the previous version was SPFx 1.17.3, and I have used the SPFx toolkit. It got the capability to upgrade the solution, which gives a step-by-step process which we can follow and upgrade the solution. So let me move to the demo part. So this is the actual view of the directory. If I click on this in the edit view, in the web property pane, I could able to see a few set of properties here, starting with the web part title, which we can add based on your requirement. And later we got the search on first name. So based on first name or last name, you can search the people's name here. And nextly, we got the result layout. So by default, it will be sender. And if we toggle it to space between, it will add some space between the cards. And nextly, we have the properties to search. So whatever the properties you are going to search in the search box, you can add it here. You can also add custom properties that are available in the user profile properties. So below to that, we got the pagination. So where the least pagination is 2 and the maximum value is around 20. So based on your requirement, you can adjust these values. So coming to the most interesting part of this solution is actually the live persona card. Means if you hover on these cards, right? So you see these a nice Microsoft UX of live persona card. So this is actually the same component we are rendering from the organization chart. For example, if we move into the out of the box solution, this is actually the out of the box solution organization chart. And if I hover on this, I could see this same component getting loaded. So for this solution, we are actually loading this component using the SP component loader. So I will showcase you in the code itself. So let me move to the coding part. So this is actually the root component where all the components getting loaded, starting with the web part title, search box, and pivots. Pivots are actually used for rendering the alphabets. So you could able to see A, B, C, D like the alphabets to A to Z, and those are all mapping from this pivot only. So let's see how the live persona is getting loaded. So when this persona card loads for the very first time, right? So at that time, we are actually passing the live persona card component ID. So we pass this component ID to the SP component loader, and it returns the actual component. So which is actually set to the state. And below, if you scroll down, like you could see the condition where we are checking the live persona card. So if it exists, then we calls the live persona card. Otherwise, we calls the basic persona card. So let's see what we have in the live persona card. So it actually returns the JSX element. So we pass the live persona card itself and some other properties, including service scope, legacy, UPN, and some callback functions. And we have the children JSX element. So whenever we hover on these basic persona card, so at that time you could see the live persona card getting popped out. So lastly, we have these as I mentioned, like we are using the PNP search. So PNP search method. So we are actually taking 3 parameters here. The search string itself means the alphabet. For example, in the initial load, it is starting with the alphabet A, and at that time, it is returning some users details, right? So it is using this search string. And second parameter is actually the search query. So whatever you are typing in the search box, it is collecting and passing to this search users new function. And finally is the initial search. So below to that, we got the if condition where we check is whether the initial search is happening. If it is the initial search, and we construct the search query and we pass to the PNP search method. And otherwise, if it is not the initial search, and we check for the search query, and we assign that search query to the query text, and we send that query text to the search method. Now, this function, this solution is also available in your Teams channel. So you can also sync this app to the Teams so that you can add this one to the Teams channel. So if I move into the Teams channel, so here I can see these same experience that I'm getting from this web part. So, and also you got these properties here. So you can update these properties accordingly. Yeah, so that's all about this web part.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sandeep. And it's always great to see updated web parts like that and revised way of doing things. One thing I should point out is, because this is a topic that comes up all the time, a lot of our sample web parts in the repository are production ready, right? If you look at the code here, it's almost like you should be able to build it and deploy it. However, we never publish the SPPKGs. You have to build the web parts yourself. And that's obviously for security reasons. You should not ever bring code from the internet and just deploy it to your tenant. But again, if you need to use this web part or other web parts in our sample repository, you can always download the code, build it yourself, review the code to make sure that it doesn't do anything evil, as we're sure that Sandeep is not doing anything evil. And then you can follow the policies within the organization to deploy the web part. And now, speaking of following policies, I don't even know how that segue works. But speaking of following policies, let's pass it to Chris Kent, with whom I have the pleasure of working every day. Chris, are you ready?
Maybe. Let's see. But it should be. Let's see. I've got to include the sound. All right. Yes. All right. Allow me to demonstrate some code I downloaded off the internet and put in my intranet. Perfect. All right. I assume you can hear and see me. Someone give a thumbs up. Yeah. There we go.
We can.
Sure.
Yep.
Wow. All right. That's me. And that's all the slides. Anyway, back to the actual stuff. So if we head over to our Mockingbird site, as we know, the mockingbirds love nothing more than to mock others like humans and so on. And of course, they love to do this just like humans in some ways, right? So humans love to watch birds. We like to go out and watch the birds and make fun of them the whole time, I assume, right? We're all saying nasty, snide remarks about those birds all the time. Well, The birds are no different. The birds also say those kinds of things about the humans, right? And they wanted to have that represented in their intranet. It's a core value to them, right? The mocking of others. So they wanted some way to do that. All right, sorry, I got confused by Elliot's message. I was like, oh no! All right. So what was I saying? So these birds, they like to mock people. They like to mock crowds, right? So how do they do that in their intranet, right? They could get a video of some crowds, and then they could occasionally watch that video on a loop and make fun of it. But that's boring, right? Now there are plenty of web parts to help make that happen, but there are complications with video, right? In terms of fixed sizing, it's not dynamic. You can't do some other fancy stuff should you want to, and so on. So they decided to make their own web part. So we head on over to our mock bench. All right. So here we go. Here is a web part that they built. It's based on a crowd simulator demo that someone else put together, not me. Right. So this allows them to look at various random members of the PNP team as they walk around, maybe say at a conference like the M365 Community Conference in Vegas. Wow. There you go. There's a random plug for that. But they're walking around. And how does this work, right? And why is this important? Well, it's not important. That's the first step. But how does it work? Let's take a look at that. Right, so let's jump on over to our code to see that. All right. So as mentioned, this is largely just me adapting someone else's code, right? I did not attempt to say it. I will highlight it, though. That is the person. And they put together this crowd simulator. And all I did was I brought it in here. Well, if you want a horse, there's a horse right there. There you go. Wow. Right. In fact, but this is a Mockingbirds demo, so let's add a bird. There we go. What a cocktail. Sounds good. Yeah, Barack Obama sounds perfect. Okay, so there we go. Now the bird and horse are friends. I hope everyone's happy in the comments there. Perfect. All right. So now we're back over here. So all I did was I adapted this code pen, right, to make this work and put in some random, images of the PNP team. And in order to do that, I could have brought in the JavaScript directly as that is ordered in SPFx, but instead I brought it directly in here into my web part file. This is a minimal web parts, no framework or anything. And I just took it here and I added all the typing information and some interfaces and blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, it's just their code, and it's just a bunch of fancy drawing code. And the main thing it uses something called GSAP, which is a nice third-party animation tool kit for you, and obviously it works within SPFx. So that's exciting because, again, SPFx, when you think about SPFx, sometimes we see a lot of demos and they're really great, and they're very focused on business needs, and they've got a series of buttons and they've got some cool layouts and all that's great, but the browser is capable of so much more, and there's a lot of amazing stuff out there. And luckily with SPFx, because it is just full-on web development, you can bring a lot of those third-party type tools in here, such as this one. Wow. So if we come down here, the main thing it's really doing, just for everyone that's aware, is calling this render function. So it's using a canvas. So this is the difference, right? We're not grabbing some, a bunch of image components and moving them around on a timer job. Instead, we're using a canvas. Now, when you use something like a canvas to draw, you can have much quicker operations. It's much faster for drawing all of these things. You can do some really, really cool stuff. In fact, there's a ton of stuff out there. I'll show you some demos of those using 3D charting and all sorts of other really neat visualizations, and it's highly performant. And the other thing is when you're doing it, you can do things such as requesting an animation frame, which allows your code to work nicely with everything else that's going on. In other words, you don't just have to block the whole web page just because you decided you want a crowd walking around at the bottom, right? So all it does is it goes through here and it's got a little draw loop, right? So each of the people are called peeps and they just draw themselves, right? And it uses that GSAP to calculate all those fun things. And as they order, there's a bunch of other ones. So Green Sock is another really great animation toolkit. I demoed that a few years back on Thanksgiving. So check those out, but there's a bunch of these, right? Okay, and then the actual web part here, this is it, right? Boom, put a canvas on there, and then I start the crowd, which all it does is it draws everything to that canvas and manages all that with that above code. Okay, so that's exciting. Just wanted to show off the canvas. Now let's do another one here. Let's go back to the page here. Again, if you're wondering, this is that thing. Let's copy that, and I'll paste that in the chat for anyone that wants to see that. It's a very nice animation framework. It works pretty well. It does not, actually, I can't remember if it works very well with React, but Green Sock certainly does, and there's others that work really well with React or have React wrappers if you're using React. Okay. All right, and of course, if you're looking for other things that you, well, that's weird.
Chris, we can't hear you if you're still talking.
Oh, did someone mute me? Did I mute myself? All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. You broke me. How could you do it? All right. Well, I probably said some things. So wish you'd heard them. They were really amazing nuggets of wisdom. But we don't have time to go back over those. Moving on.
I think you were finished.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm all done. I'll tell you what. Let's look at another web part here that we put together. All right. So let's grab it here, and it is our little Nintendo. All right. So here we have a little Nintendo. And of course, this is the Mockingbirds, and we didn't want to get in copyright trouble, so we're using an open source ROM, which, believe it or not, those exist. So we're not going to show Mario or any of those other things here. But look at that. We are actually running a Nintendo emulator inside SharePoint Framework. Right? In fact, I can even play this little thing, maybe. Let's see. Woo! My high score is 2. So, right, is that important? No, it's not very important. In fact, this is probably a terrible idea. But the whole idea here is that you can bring in all sorts of interesting stuff, and all of this is doing is using a canvas to draw all of this. So let's take a look at that code. Whoop. All right, let's head on over to that. We'll switch this guy so you can see that. So this one was a React web part. Did not need to be. I just like React, and I highly recommend it. But the idea was that you can use React with all of these things as needed. Right, so I've got very small amount of state, right, for the button and so on. But you can see the actual Nintendo part. So the web part itself, there's nothing in here. There's nothing in the web part. It just hands it off to React. Which is why I'm in the wrong one. So if we go over here, we can see down here, this is the main section of the web part, right? So it's a functional component. Let me go up to the top of that. Functional component, right? So it's just React NES, right? It's using something called Nostalgist, which is what provides that emulator in the browser. Which provides a nice package for us that works directly here inside our SharePoint Framework. I just did an npm install on the emulator, and here's where I'm managing that state, pausing it or not, right? So it's got a nice API where I can resume, pause, start. I can do screenshots. I could load in saved states. I can load in multiple ROMs. There's all sorts of stuff that could be done, right? And then it's as simple as this, right? Bring it in, put a cool fancy shader on it, right? So it looks even more like a CRT. And so on. All of that's possible because down here, all we're really doing is we're putting, again, a canvas. That's it. We point it to the canvas, and all of that will handle all the drawing, all the input capture, all the sound. Everything happens for us, and all that drawing happens in the same way as the crowd simulator. We're using the canvas, which means, again, it plays nicely with our intranet. Ooh, wowee! Right? One thing I will note is that there is a technique I'm using here that would probably be helpful to call out. And so if you look at, like, say, a vanilla web part, right, and you do it with, like, say, the React stuff, right, you get this thing as your default component, and you'll see there's this lovely thing. One of the first things I do in almost every web part that if I don't do the minimal, or if I do the React one, I go and delete these silly welcome assets, right? That's important. So how do you get images, right, in here, right? So that is, like, it's one thing if you've got a URL to an image, maybe you've got a CDN or someplace else, and that's fantastic. If you got that, hey, use that. But sometimes you just want to include these, right? So they've just included them here, and what they've done is they've used this require, and when they do that, those get built in and come on over, and you can do things like, so if you wanted to use, say, the React or the Fluent icons, right, there's an SVG package that you can use. If you wanted to get the actual image, when you reference those locally, it's just going to be a URL to the file system in the node modules. But when you actually compile and run this thing, they'll actually be converted to data URLs, right? But the idea is, I don't care, right? I'm just going to use them, and I use this require. Now, I find this can be tedious to manage, right? Especially if you're doing this thing they're doing here, which they're illustrating with the dark theme, right? They're detecting if it's a dark theme, they're passing it down as a prop. And then every time you use an image, you need to know that there is a dark and a light. Right now, in this case, there's one image. It's not hard. Nobody needed anything else. But what you can do is, what I often do is I end up writing something a little simpler or a little something to wrap that around. Whereas I write a record of string and string, right, where I just map all these images here. In this case, I've only got one, which is that cabinet, that background image, which is not part of that canvas. The canvas is drawn on top of it, right? And how do I manage that, right? So that I do this, and then I can just go images.cabinet, and I can reference those. In this case, I've kept it very simple, but you can get kind of crazy with it, right? Where you can have the images be aware itself of dark mode, high contrast mode if you're in Teams, and so on, and picking the appropriate images for you. And then everywhere you're using images, it's very much like strings dot whatever, and you don't care about what the localization comes out to. It can be the same thing for images. Now, one of the problems with doing this is, how do I use these images in my CSS directly, right? So one of the things that I have done, and you can do it too if you'd like, is I've got this overly fancy little function just because I like to copy and paste it, but you could just do it manually. And what I'm doing here is it takes all of my images and converts them into CSS variables, right, as CSS properties. So then I could then pass that way down here. I just say style equals those CSS variables on the parent, and that makes those variables available over here. So then I can say my background is simple as doing the image cabinet. All right, so now I can reference those here. Now, there's nothing wrong with generating an actual image and setting the sources they've done. And in fact, you're going to do that a lot. But sometimes you want to work with, like, say, masks or background images or some of the fancier stuff inside CSS. And this is a great way to hand that off while still having it work through your build system and being required and all that. Okay, so that's that exciting stuff about those images. That was a little side note. So let's go back to our page here, so our Mockingbirds. And so what I've mentioned here is that all of this stuff works nicely. Now let's see if that's actually true. Let's refresh. So here on our homepage, we've actually gone down here, and we've got our Nintendo, and we've got our crowd simulators running down here. And we even have my old friend here from a demo a while back, the microphone, right? You'll notice here when I do this, because it's playing nicely with the browser, this is a blocking request. This is waiting for an animation frame. So it stops everything, and the code doesn't happen, right? Again, that's how it's really powerful and won't mess up with your intranet if you're using the canvas with those animation frames. Okay, so there we go. And I could say things like, this has a silly cup of coffee, right? And it can be mocked that way, and let's see if that works.
I'm Chris Kent, and I say, Vesa has a silly cup of coffee, blah.
Oh, I spelled coffee wrong. I don't know, I hope you guys heard it say that. But the idea is this is executing as a web part down here. This is executing as a web part up here. And even at the same time, we could have this running, right? And so now we've got our Nintendo running. Also, all on the page. Everything is just working as expected. There's no real slowdown because, again, we're just using the canvas. So, wowee indeed. All right. So, Hugo, I know you've done quite a bit with some of the canvas stuff. I've pretty much finished my demo here, but if you want to talk for a couple minutes about some of the stuff you've done or some of the other areas, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, what I think what you've demonstrated, Chris, is again the richness of Canvas, but also how interactive it can be, right? Because you can pass inputs to it, and it will react quickly, and that includes fast frame rates and things like that. There are actual business uses to this scenario, and some of the things that I've done past, I've done a case management system where you could see the interconnectivity between cases, and I had used a molecule visualization, library that actually showed the cases as little molecules and the lines between the molecules to show how they were connected. And I was using a different size based on how related the items were and things like that. It allowed people to see the data in a way that they had never seen it before. Another cool thing that I had done in the past was for a college, I had done a 3D isometric map of the campus, so you could actually find your directions around a campus, and it looked like those fancy maps that you see in the mall. Those are all kind of scenarios that used real-time data, business data, and they had really practical use. And they all use Canvas behind the scene. One last one was a 3D model that basically showed the world, and it had points on the 3D world map that showed inputs and outputs going and things like that. But I do like the Super Nintendo emulator. Do we expect these web parts to show up in the sample repos, Chris?
If you want them, you can have them.
Awesome.
Want them?
I'll tell you.
Sure, no problem.
I'll tell you what. You pass them to me. I'll get them ready for the repo. Unless the crowd doesn't agree with us, I think that those are all great samples. Awesome. All right. Well, let me share my screen. Hopefully it's coming. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Loaded for me.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. All right. So we had, again, 3 awesome demos. Ahmad did his first demo in the community. We had Sandeep and Chris Kent showing us awesome solutions as well. Thank you, everyone, for your awesome demos. And if you'd like to give us feedback about these calls, you can actually go to aka.ms/community/calls/feedback. I always laughed at how long this shortcut is, but this is where you can let us know what you'd like to change on our community calls. And if you want to be live and talk to members of our community, you can join our Discord server by going to aka.ms/community/discord or scan the fancy QR code that's there. We have over 2,800 members, and that's amazing. This morning was 2,700 members, so we are growing quickly. Again, please join us. We love to see everyone in our community. All right, I would like to thank you for attending this call. And the recording for this call will be available within 24 hours on our Microsoft Community Learning YouTube channel at aka.ms/community/YouTube. And make sure to subscribe so you stay up to date with our videos. Our next Viva Connections and SPFx call is going to be on April 17th at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Our next M365 and Power Platform call, however, is going to be next week on April 10th at 7 a.m. All the calls are available at aka.ms/community/calls. And with that, thanks, everyone. We're closing with 2 minutes to spare. Have a great day.